Food is a window into the world of a person, their culture, and their real or perceived status. There were foods available to Europeans along the frontier that had never been available to them before. Today on the Deerskin Diary, we're going to look at a master's thesis by Jeffrey Lee Watts Roy of archaeological remains of food at one early American frontier site. So stick with us. The Fort Chiswell site was located in Wythe County, Virginia at the foot of the Appalachians, and by car that's about 3 hours east of the Cumberland Gap and near a tributary to the New River. It was first settled in the mid-1750s by Alexander Sayre, a settler of Scots-Irish descent who settled there after leaving his home in Pennsylvania. And at one time he had 504 acres, which was nothing to laugh at, a grist mill. He was a captain in the local militia, and he was known in part for being drunk in court and for blasphemy. By 1764, though, he was broke, in debt, and the following year he drowned in the New River, some wondering if it was a suicide. The frontier was not a place as much as it was a region, and within that region there were various cultures with higher and lower classes. And it is between these two that we often find people trying to climb the social ladder and present the appearance of a higher status in an almost fake it till you make it approach. According to the report, a total of 5,132 bones were analyzed for the study. Of this amount, 1,183, or 23%, were identifiable to a species of fauna. This was excellent evidence to point back to what one frontier family was relying on as a source of their protein. In the New World, people's traditional diets were changing, and they seemed willing to go along with the changes. Mammals were by far the largest represented species, with a mixture of both wild and domestic ones. The bones of deer, sheep, goat, pig, cow, beaver, bear, and raccoon were all represented. But besides mammals, there was also evidence of catfish, 2 turtles, and turkey, chicken, duck, and geese. Now, what makes this so fascinating is the fact that wild game comprised a significant component of the Sayers family diet. Now, this is in stark contrast to other families living in similar situations along the frontier. Could it be that Sayers was an avid hunter, or could it be that the cultural sport of hunting also helped promote a semblance of wealth? Now, venison contributed to their diet in abundance, and the archaeological evidence pointed to 22 deer carcasses in all butchered on site. But how is this interesting? That almost seems normal to most of us. We oftentimes think about the frontier as being loaded with people who simply didn't care about the rules of regular society, but time and time again, historical fact proves that to be false. The frontier had people living in it that cared a lot about what other people thought of them. And get this, hunting was one example of a way to show others that you had leisure time and that you were of a social class that was allowed to even hunt. The eating of deer meat by the Sayers family may have been an emulation of the higher societies who have always used material goods to include food to legitimize or flex their status. Could it be that Sayers' family came from wealth, or could it be that they were emulating wealth in an effort to make everyone else think that they were wealthy? Cattle represented the next highest concentration of identified bone fragments after deer. Cattle were probably the most common source of protein for agrarian families all along the frontier. They were slaughtered both young and old, suggesting the demise of the older animals came after their use for other things like milk and offspring had come to an end. British colonists brought with them their agrarian practices from the Old World, but the abundance of resources and land in the New World rendered some of those practices unnecessary. Cattle and pigs could free rein, and there were new foods, like corn, that became staples of their new diet. Instead of strict fences, cattle and pigs were able to roam the wilderness feral and often were harvested by hunting. So why the higher mix of wild game meat and domestic cattle? Well, besides the obvious that they were probably using what was available to them, the ability to have enough free time to hunt also implied wealth or an appearance of trying to look wealthy. And enough time to hunt to provide your family with the majority of your basic protein needs also implied that there were farming or agrarian practices that you weren't doing or didn't have to do. Now, we know the Sayers family owned roughly 500 acres there in Virginia, so that in and of itself would imply that they were wealthy. But here's the clue from the archaeological remains. You see, 15 of the deer that were sampled had broken mandibles, which means that the butcher themselves, which was likely a member of the Sayers family, was actually manipulating or breaking the jaw to remove the deer tongue. And the tongue was a delicacy among richer elites in Europe. After all, each animal only had one tongue, so the more tongues you had, the more abundant things appeared. And the fact that Sayers hunted so much and bothered to save carcass parts like the tongue indicate that this obscure frontier man knew how to appear well-to-do. And more important than that, he wanted to. The frontier was chock full of people trying to make a better life for themselves. Your notion of yourself and how you revealed yourself to the world may have been relative to where you were in life, but it was nonetheless one of the most important aspects of it. And that notion is what helped you move through society, and it also what helped spread a unique American culture westward through the frontier. We'll see you next time.